The Harry Potter films may be filled with all sorts of fantastic beasts and kooky characters, but they can't hold an enchanted candle to some of the stranger happenings that took place behind the camera. These are just a few of the weirdest things that happened on the set of the Harry Potter flicks. In a fun scene from Chamber of Secrets, Ron and Harry take an enchanted car to Hogwarts because they miss the Hogwarts Express. Upon arrival, they encounter, crash into, the Whomping Willow, a magical tree grown a generation before to protect the school from a student who was also a werewolf. The car was damaged, of course, but it wasn't the tree's only victim, at least not in real life. In reality, many cars were used to get the right shots for this scene. 16 to be exact. The car model was a 1960 Ford Anglia 105E, a car that, in its heyday, was fairly popular in Britain. Over 1.1 million were produced between 1959 and 1968. Rather than relying on CGI for the car meets tree and the tree wins scene, the special effects team erected an 85-foot-tall physical tree for filming. They also used 16 real cars for the scene, each of which was specifically altered depending on what the scene required. Movie magic or just a crap ton of hard work? You be the judge.
That's gonna kill me.
The plan, at first, was to use the historic Canterbury Cathedral to film the scenes when Harry first enters Hogwarts in the Sorcerer's Stone. Despite the money Warner Brothers offered, the dean refused, opposing the film's pagan images. As a result, the project moved to Gloucester Cathedral instead. Surprisingly, the Dean of Gloucester said that many people commented on the friendliness of the cathedral and that it would be a perfect setting for a story about a boy making friends at school. Well, the dean may have been on board, but many local residents were, well, not. In fact, many were downright troubled, resulting in talk of a protest. Many an incensed letter to the editor was received by the Gloucester citizen, with one especially ticked-off fellow in particular even protesting the sheer fact that a movie would be filmed in the church, pagan images or not. An honorary chaplain explained to the BBC that the large hall that would be used for the film was also used for meetings and markets. In other words, the rest of Britain was just fine, and that guy was likely just a crank. Besides, other scenes were filmed at similarly sacred settings, like Durham Cathedral, proving that not every Anglican had a problem with movie crews milling about a house of God. They probably just wanted a chance at the craft services table. And who wouldn't? Can you imagine the spread? It must have been positively bewitching. Everyone remembers that moment in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone when the kids walk into the Great Hall for the first time, and they look up and see hundreds of candles floating over their heads. It's our big introduction to Hogwarts, so movie makers were under a lot of pressure to make the whole scene as impressive as possible. According to the Amazing Book of Movie Trivia, the special effects team used real candles, which they suspended from the ceiling with thin wire. The plan was to remove the wire in post-production, which, if that sounds super tedious, then yeah, it was tedious. The problem, though, was that the candles kept burning through the wires, and then the candles would fall onto the actors' heads. Now that's just plain dangerous. Producer Chris Columbus later told Entertainment Weekly that they were able to use the first take of the kids entering the Great Hall, with the camera panning up toward the floating candles. After that shot, though, it was all over. The special effects team decided it was too much trouble, and probably also too dangerous, plus the whole tedious thing, to use real candles. Subsequent takes were done with CGI. Jason Isaacs, who played the despicable, super blonde, super evil Lucius Malfoy, is nothing like his alter ego. Maybe that's why he felt that he needed to do a little method acting in order to really get into the evil spirit. And what do evil people do when they are trying to get into the evil spirit? They steal stuff, apparently. Isaacs said in an interview with Bang Showbiz, "I once tried to take a copy of the Daily Prophet because there were thousands of them." To his credit, the director, David Yates, had given him the impression that he was actually allowed to have the prop, but he was later thwarted by security people who told him Yates wanted it back. Quote, "It was so embarrassing," Isaac said. In the end, he reportedly wound up empty-handed.
My sole concern has always been and will always be the welfare of this school and, of course, its students.
According to CinemaBlend, though, Isaacs wasn't the only one nicking props from the set. The late Alan Rickman, who you'll recall played Severus Snape, stole a buttload of gold galleons on one of the first days of shooting. That both set a precedent for evil method acting and put security on high alert for prop theft. Just like every kid, actor Rupert Grint, aka Ron Weasley, always wanted to own an ice cream truck. Well, maybe not every kid wants to own an ice cream truck, but it's easy to see the appeal of having ready access to an endless supply of that sweet, sweet cold stuff. Anyway, Grint evidently did not outgrow his childhood dream of owning an ice cream truck. So, being the responsible adult that he is, he bought one.
Ice cream van?
Yeah. I've had that for a while. It's something I've always wanted as a child. It's kind of a dream, really.
According to Rupert Grint Press, the foremost authority on Rupert Grint, one of his first purchases as an uber-loaded superstar was a 1974 Mr. Whippy Bedford van, which he keeps, quote, well-stocked. Grint once boasted in an interview, "It's got a proper machine that dispenses Mr. Whippy ice cream, and I buy my lollies wholesale, so I never run short." Grint doesn't sell ice cream, he's unlicensed, you see, but he has fun passing it out to kids in the summer. And on the last day of shooting, he drove the van onto the Harry Potter set, once again bragging, "The cast and crew were having a barbecue and I supplied the lollies and ice creams." Adorable. Alan Rickman wasn't the only thespian behind the nominally evil characters in the Harry Potter universe who seems suspiciously prone to accidentally doing evil things on set. We're sure it's all just a coincidence that it's only the evil characters who steal from the set and rupture the eardrums of other actors, but we'll let you decide. In her role as Bellatrix Lestrange, Helena Bonham Carter had to do a lot of evil things, and one of the most evil was perpetrated on co-star Matthew Lewis's eardrum. Carter was menacing Lewis's character Neville Longbottom with her wand when she decided that she needed to try on an especially sadistic brand of menacing. She told Entertainment Weekly, "I thought I could brandish the wand like a sort of Q-tip and clean out his ear, sort of torture it." Turns out Lewis moved in exactly the wrong direction while Carter's wand was in his ear, and she ended up perforating the young actor's eardrum. She later confessed, quote, "He didn't admit to me that he actually had some internal bleeding about 3 days later." Happily, the damage wasn't permanent. Still, Carter wasn't above admitting to Entertainment Weekly that she may have, quote, "taken her sadism a bit too literally." Yeah, we'd have to agree with that take. Children aren't exactly known for professional discretion. Yes, even children who play Harry Potter characters. If you've ever drawn a rude picture of an authority figure when you were a kid, you'll be able to relate to this one. On the set of one of the early films, Rupert Grint recalled drawing an unpretty picture of Alan Rickman as Professor Snape. According to The Independent, Alan Rickman was standing right behind the young actor the entire time.
I drew this rather unpretty picture of Alan Rickman, and as I was drawing it, Alan Rickman was standing right behind me, and I was so scared.
Could you say Avada Kedavra? Now, if this had been an actual scene shot for any other movie, the authority figure would have snatched up the picture, scowled at it, and sentenced the offender to detention. Or, if Snape's track record is any indication, an alarmingly over-the-top assignment.
And on my desk by Monday morning, 2 rolls of parchment on the werewolf, with particular emphasis on recognizing it.
Rickman did the opposite. He was actually a good sport about it. In fact, he was such a good sport that he took it home as a keepsake. Rickman would later recall the drawing, admitting,
"I made him sign it and I have it in my possession." And I'm very fond of it.
"We're not crying, you're crying." So just in case you needed another reminder that young people are not known for their professional discretion, here's unprofessional behavior example number 2, also involving Rupert Grint, who really seemed to have a hard time abandoning the childish antics even as he got older. We can sort of understand what was going through his head in this particular incident though, because when you're a kid and you've grown up on a movie set with a lot of other kids, they become almost like your siblings. And then one day you're all grown up and, oh god, one of your friends has to kiss the other one and gag, barf. So yeah, that's basically how it went. According to Digital Spy, Rupert Grint couldn't stop himself from cracking up while filming Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, as co-stars Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson went in for, quote, a pretty violent kiss. Radcliffe later told Wynn that Grint was, quote, laughing so much off camera he was asked to leave the set. Apparently, he was laughing so hard that his eyes were watering. Not a good look for a scene where Grint's face is supposed to look like, well, this.
What are you compared with the chosen one?
Ron, it's lying! Your mother confessed she would have preferred me as a son.
So that's pretty juvenile, Rupert. Why don't you go hang out quietly in your ice cream truck for a while? It's hard to imagine stoic Severus Snape and always composed Albus Dumbledore pulling pranks, and it's even harder to imagine Severus Snape and Albus Dumbledore pulling pranks that involve farting. But in the world of Harry Potter, pretty much anything is possible. According to Cosmopolitan, Alan Rickman and Michael Gambon decided to prank Daniel Radcliffe while filming a scene for Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. In the scene, pretty much every Hogwarts student is asleep in a sleeping bag in the Great Hall, and Dumbledore is waxing poetic while pressing the remote button for a fart machine he's put inside Daniel Radcliffe's sleeping bag.
You know, it's completely our own world, and we like to swim in the deepest waters.
And it's the Great Hall, of course, so the farts are bouncing off the walls and echoing all over the room, and pretty soon everyone is laughing, even stoic Snape and always composed Dumbledore.
They had put a fart machine into my sleeping bag.
This hall echoes.
And Michael Gambon had actually been pressing it during the take, I found out.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the most awesome Harry Potter scene you never saw. Actors often go to great extremes for a role, but the following actor's crazy on-set behavior gives new meaning to the term too far. From on-set meltdowns to physical altercations, you won't believe some of the lines these actors crossed. Every story that's come out about Jared Leto's method acting while filming his scenes as the Joker for Suicide Squad has sounded less awe-inspiring than simply gross. He confessed to E! News that he sent various cast members, well, used condoms and anal beads.
I did a lot of things to create a dynamic, to create an element of surprise, of spontaneity.
That's surprise!
Seriously, dude. What?
I mean, the Joker is somebody who doesn't really respect things like personal space or boundaries.
Fortunately for Leto, he didn't mess with Viola Davis, whose reaction to his on-set antics perfectly summed up the reaction of any rational human being.
I would have got my husband, who was called Headache Ball back in the day when he played football, and I would have said, take care of the Joker.
Of all the film set freakouts in Hollywood history, none may ever equal the expletive-filled rant Christian Bale fired off at cinematographer Shane Hurlbut during the making of Terminator Salvation in 2009. It painted a horrible picture of Bale, who came off looking like a rage-filled blowhard after Hurlbut reportedly distracted him during a quiet, emotional scene.
Am I gonna walk around and rip your lights down in the middle of a scene? Then why the are you walking right through? Like this in the background.
Listening to Bale's tantrum years after it leaked, it's easy to understand why he was quick to apologize on K-Rock FM's Kevin and Bean show.
There is nobody that has heard that tape that is hit harder by it than me.
Aww.
So I make no excuses for it. It is inexcusable.
Bale went on to say that he and Hurlbut made up very shortly after, although, shocker, they haven't worked together since. Katherine Heigl is one of those actresses who's reportedly so difficult to work with, entire lists are made about her alleged on-set behavior. In the case of the 2010 movie Life as We Know It, it depends who you believe. While the film's director and executive producer praised Heigl's work on the movie to The Hollywood Reporter, some insiders claimed they witnessed desperately difficult situations involving the Emmy-winning star. The source revealed she can cost you time every single day of shooting. Wardrobe issues, not getting out of the trailer, questioning the script every single day. Even getting her deal closed at Warner's was hard. She hit that point of no. When you start to remember that Heigl reportedly made $12 million for the movie, you can't help but roll your eyes. It's not a huge wonder then that Heigl has essentially disappeared from Hollywood. As fun as she was to watch, you still have to play nice at work. Rumors have persisted for years that Gene Hackman was a nightmare to work with on the set of Wes Anderson's The Royal Tenenbaums. Those stories were finally confirmed by Anderson and Tenenbaum stars Gwyneth Paltrow and Angelica Houston during a 10th anniversary screening of the film at the New York Film Festival in 2011. According to IndieWire, all three of them admitted to being scared to work with Hackman in the first place. During a Q&A panel, Houston said, "I was a lot scared, but I was more concerned with protecting Wes. None of us have heard or seen of Gene since this movie." Later in the Q&A, Anderson vaguely confirmed a long-standing rumor that yes, Hackman really did call him the C word. Still, he did his best to downplay the whole situation, saying, "He's a huge force and I really enjoyed working with him. Even though he was very challenging with me, it was very exciting seeing him launch into these scenes. He may be funny while the cameras are rolling, but in between takes, Mike Myers is reportedly incredibly difficult to work with. His ridiculous antics on the set of Wayne's World have been agonizingly detailed by the film's director, Penelope Spheris, who later told Entertainment Weekly that she, quote, hated that bastard for years. She vented, "You should have heard him when I was trying to do that Bohemian Rhapsody scene. I can't move my neck like that. Why do we have to do this so many times? No one is going to laugh at that." Even worse, according to ABC News, Spheris recalled a moment when Myers spent hours on the phone with his manager threatening to quit because the set didn't provide margarine. If there's one director in Hollywood you shouldn't piss off, it's Steven Spielberg. That's allegedly what Julia Roberts did while filming Hook in 1991. Reportedly heartbroken over the end of her relationship with Kiefer Sutherland, Roberts was rumored to have been notoriously difficult to work with, to the point where some tabloids referred to her as Tinker Hell, according to the New York Times. Even Spielberg himself confirmed tensions on the set in an interview with 60 Minutes, saying flat out, It was an unfortunate time for us to work together.
Steven Spielberg, I find quite confused. I find him to be, unfortunately, not as good at remembering the time that we spent together as I am.
If tabloid rumors are to be believed, Jennifer Lopez may have experienced her own unflattering moment while filming the romantic comedy What to Expect When You're Expecting. According to the New York Daily News, Lopez, who had just split from her husband of 10 years, Mark Anthony, wouldn't talk to anyone directly on the film's Atlanta set. In fact, the only way she allegedly would communicate was through her handler. So much for still being Jenny from the block. The exact details of how and why Shia LaBeouf threw a punch at Tom Hardy while filming their 2012 movie Lawless are unclear. LaBeouf first alluded to it in an interview with Details, and Hardy confirmed the altercation in a subsequent chat with Den of Geek, saying with a laugh, "He just attacked me. He was drinking moonshine. I was wearing a cardigan and, went down." The actual punch has since been downplayed. LaBeouf later told MTV News that it was brotherly love, not moonshine, that caused the fight. Meanwhile, director John Hillcoat claimed on Reddit that while the fight did happen, Hardy wasn't actually knocked out. Instead, the two of them simply had to be restrained. Isaiah Washington was fired from the set of Grey's Anatomy in 2007 amid rumors that he directed a homophobic slur at co-star T.R. Knight during a heated fight with Patrick Dempsey on the set the previous fall. In the lead-up to getting fired, Washington repeatedly denied the allegations, most famously during a press conference at the 2007 Golden Globes.
No, I did not call TR. Never happened. Never happened.
Knight contradicted his account. Washington finally copped to his offense in an interview with Larry King, claiming he meant to use the offending word in the context of, quote, somebody who is being weak. And goodbye, Isaiah Washington. Lindsay Lohan's bad behavior on the set of Georgia Rule is the stuff of Hollywood legend. According to the Los Angeles Times, things eventually got so bad that the studio chief of Morgan Creek Productions actually sent her a letter in which he claimed she was, quote, acting like a spoiled child. Lohan, who was often late to the set or missed filming days altogether, even ticked off various cast members, including none other than two-time Oscar winner Jane Fonda. Amid rumors of an on-set blow-up, Fonda confirmed to CBS News that, yes, she once cursed Lohan out in her trailer.
She was late one day, and I got mad, and I went in and I said, get your ass out here on the set.
If it's any consolation for Lohan, her feud with Fonda was limited to just that incident, and Fonda claimed that overall she loved working with her. If Patton Oswalt is to be believed, Wesley Snipes was a terror to work with on the set of Blade Trinity.
He would only answer to the name Blade. You couldn't call him... He would only answer to Blade? The Blade, yeah.
Speaking to the AV Club in 2012, Oswalt described Snipes as an off-the-rails diva who only came to set to film his close-ups. He revealed he wouldn't come out of his trailer and he would smoke weed all day.
You'd walk by his trailer and this wall of pot stench would just like, whoa, and like kind of push you to the side.
Even worse, Oswalt claims that Snipes at one point tried to strangle the film's director, David S. Goyer. Yeah, that's about 50 lines crossed right there. LL Cool J's alleged improvising on the set of Oliver Stone's football drama Any Given Sunday reportedly got so violent, the Miami-Dade Police Department had to get involved. According to MTV News, Cool J pushed and punched co-star Jamie Foxx, who was wearing a helmet, during an unscripted moment.
I was rough with him again. And then, I don't know why, but, he thought it was a good idea to punch me in my face.
Foxx had reportedly tried to reason with LL, and when that didn't work, sources said Foxx threw the punch in his face. Both were said to have suffered minor injuries, with LL claiming to have knocked Foxx out with a retaliatory smackdown. Cool J allegedly claimed he was trying to make the scene, quote, more believable since they were acting. Whatever the case, Foxx told MTV News in 2006 that they ended their feud after running into each other at a Miami Heat game. By that point, he said, when you're grown, you don't really have time for all that beefing. When you're young, it's cool to have your emotions on your chest, but we're grown now. What's a surefire way to tick people off in Hollywood? Air out your dirty laundry on social media. That's exactly what Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson did in August 2016 when he posted a message to Facebook calling out some of his male castmates in Fast 8. Without naming names, he wrote, "Some conduct themselves as stand-up men and true professionals, while others don't. When you watch this movie next April and it seems like I'm not acting in some of these scenes and my blood is legit boiling, you're right." TMZ later alleged that Johnson was directly referencing Vin Diesel, with whom Johnson was rumored to clash over Diesel's producing decisions, among other things. Whatever the case, their feud appears to have died down, leading some to wonder if the feud was really just a setup. Either way, for the amount of cash he's making for Fast 8, Johnson could probably stand to bite a few bullets. The allegedly awful way in which Dustin Hoffman treated co-star Meryl Streep on the set of Kramer vs. Kramer was well documented in the 2016 biography Her Again, Becoming Meryl Streep. According to excerpts obtained by Vanity Fair, Hoffman allegedly tortured Streep during the filming of the movie. He would bring up the death of her former boyfriend and once improvised a scene by smashing a glass against a wall, leaving shards of it in her hair.
And then, in another scene, he slapped me, and when I see the movie, I see the imprint of his hand.
Although she didn't participate in the biography, Streep did imply that shooting Kramer vs. Kramer with Hoffman wasn't exactly the best of times in a 2011 interview with CBS News.
But I think he's very, very gifted. It wasn't the most fun I've ever had on a film.
Pissing off Meryl Streep? Oh, Dustin, that's a big no-no.
The Motion Picture Association of America has assigned ratings to pretty much every movie ever released during Hollywood's long history. But that doesn't mean they've always been in the right. Here are a few of the most bizarre reasons that movies have been given R ratings. This drama about 4 adolescent boys in 1950s Oregon who embark on an adventure to see a dead body has become a modern classic and something of a staple on cable television schedules. Based on a Stephen King novella and directed by Rob Reiner, Stand By Me features breakout performances from its young cast, including Will Wheaton, River Phoenix, Corey Feldman, and Jerry O'Connell. The coming-of-age film full of kids does occasionally feature some adult language, but it's mostly just the kind kids often use as soon as their parents leave the room. This handful of F-words, however, still earned the otherwise youth-friendly movie an R rating from the MPAA, as the organization strictly adhered to their codes rather than actually analyzing the overall content of the film. Columbia Pictures tried to get the screenwriters to eliminate some of the language to obtain a PG rating, but they balked at this suggestion. Reynold Gideon, one of the film's writers, told Yahoo, "Norman Lear said to us, 'Don't change a thing. If my life has meant anything, it's to keep artistic excellence the way it is. We don't try to compromise because of ratings. Also, we felt that an R would make people go, oh my God, I have to see that movie.' And people did see it. Despite the R rating, Stand By Me managed a respectable $52 million at the box office. Acclaimed by critics on its release, Love is Strange focuses on an older gay couple, Ben and George, who get married after 39 years of partnership. When George is fired from his Catholic school teaching job after the archdiocese learns of the same-sex wedding, however, the couple faces a myriad of both financial and emotional hardships. This mild but affecting drama earned 4 Independent Spirit Award nominations, as well as a highly controversial R rating for language. While Love is Strange does have some cursing, it's hard to figure out why a film labeled as delicate in its reviews would receive the same rating as 2 ultra-violent movies that opened the same weekend, Sin City: A Dame to Kill For and Jersey Shore Massacre. Many critics accuse the MPAA of hypocrisy and homophobia. Michael Phillips wrote in the Chicago Tribune, "No matter how discreet and clothed its depictions, Love is Strange is apparently just too gay for a PG-13. There isn't another way to read the MPAA's actions." R ratings can often hinder a movie's box office returns, so many studios push hard for PG-13 ratings, since they typically bring in millions more dollars. Meanwhile, horror is a particularly profitable genre and tends to come with its own hugely loyal fan base. Combine the two things, and you're likely to rake in the cash, unless the MPAA hits you with an R. After scaring audiences with his Insidious franchise, horror maestro James Wan set out to make a true-life haunted house flick about Ed and Lorraine Warren, the paranormal investigators who worked on the infamous Amityville case. Despite having no salty language, nudity, or gore, The Conjuring still received an R because, in the words of producer Walter Hamada, the MPAA felt the film was just so scary. There are no specific scenes or tone you could take out to get it PG-13. Wan said he was aiming for a PG-13 rating, but he didn't seem to mind receiving an R, even though a lot of internet critics took the MPAA to task for it. Luckily for him, The Conjuring whipped up more than $319 million worldwide, and it's entirely possible that the controversy behind its R rating actually gave it a boost at the box office. Army of Darkness is the 3rd slightly less violent movie in the Evil Dead series. A Wired writer who wrote about watching the film with his 9 and 11-year-olds even called it as mild as any PG film. The gore is limited to stuff like fake-looking fountains of blood and humans fighting skeletons, while the F-word is said just once. which is well within the limits for a PG-13 rating.
Hail to the king, baby.
And yet, for reasons that are nothing less than baffling, this movie was not only rated R, but actually ran the risk of receiving an NC-17 rating, which director Sam Raimi had to fight to have reduced. According to Mental Floss, the MPAA begrudgingly agreed to change the rating after Raimi pointed out they'd based their decision on human-on-skeleton violence, and skeletons don't actually bleed. In 2002, director Richard Linklater started production on an untitled film that he called The Life Project in his hometown of Austin, Texas. There was no script, only a vague outline. Linklater wanted to tell the story of a boy as he grows up, but he didn't know how to film it. Then he had an idea: film a little part of the boy's life each year for 12 years. The resulting movie Boyhood became a critical darling and constituted an incredible cinematic feat. As the boy ages before the audience's eyes from 6 to 19, he experiences the highs and lows of growing up, falling in love, and finding himself just like any other kid. But teens themselves couldn't easily go see Boyhood because the MPAA slapped an R on the film for teen drug and alcohol use. At least one theater even decided to ignore the MPAA's guidance. The IFC Center in New York City, which is owned by Boyhood's distributor IFC Films, announced it would admit younger patrons at the theater's discretion, insisting that the film is appropriate viewing for mature adolescents. On the surface, Almost Famous is a film about rock and roll in the 1970s, but Cameron Crowe's nostalgic look at his adolescent years as a writer for Rolling Stone is really a bittersweet coming-of-age drama, with the music industry merely acting as its backdrop. After growing up in a strict household with a loving, if overbearing mother, naive 15-year-old William Miller tries to navigate a freewheeling adult world he's not entirely prepared for, as he tours with rock band Stillwater. There's obviously plenty of sex, drugs, and all kinds of profanity present throughout the film, which is why it earned an R rating, despite its fairly tame depiction of those things. This particular R rating brought Roger Ebert to pen an infamously scathing critique of the MPAA and its moral inconsistencies. Ebert argued the film shouldn't be rated R because the film applies values to its content. William himself never drinks or does drugs, doesn't use the same bad language as his hero and mentor Lester Bangs, and his so-called deflowering happens off-screen.
You're too sweet for rock and roll.
As Ebert asked in his review of the film, why did they give an R rating to a movie perfect for teenagers? Colin Firth won an Oscar for his performance in The King's Speech as King George VI, the stammering monarch who forges a special friendship with Lionel Logue, an Australian-born speech therapist. When his brother Edward abdicates the throne in order to marry divorcee Wallis Simpson, George is forced to take his place as king, putting even greater pressure on him to overcome his fears about public speaking. George and Lionel try various methods and exercises to eliminate the stammer to no avail until they discover one technique that provides a breakthrough. In one very funny scene, Lionel has George yell the F word repeatedly in order to overcome his mental blocks, which was enough to earn the otherwise tame and incredibly inspiring film an R rating, annoying director Tom Hooper in the process. In an interview with the LA Times, he asked, "How many films can claim to use swearing for its therapeutic effect?" Once the film won Best Picture at the Oscars, the Weinstein Company decided to release a PG-13 version with the curses muted to make it more family-friendly, which led to a new round of questions about the MPAA's rating system. After all, when you've begun to censor even kings' speeches, it might be time to consider abdicating your moral throne. Sometimes it can be difficult for even the most puritanical film fan to figure out just why a release received an R rating. Take Air Force One, the story of a badass American president and action hero who battles terrorists who have infiltrated Air Force One. Besides having a hugely silly premise, the film also has all the explosive violence expected of a mid-90s action movie. Common Sense Media have said of the film, "Parents need to know that violence in the film includes close-range shootings of innocent hostages and death threats to women and an adolescent girl." But even that organization, which makes a point of highlighting adult themes in films, struggled to understand why Air Force One was rated R. In their review, they wrote, "There's also scattered profanity, but in general, the R rating is pretty surprising. Seems the MPAA has slapped PG-13s on nastier films than this." Here's what Common Sense Media had to say about The Matrix. An exciting, sometimes confusing sci-fi adventure with a brooding Keanu Reeves and a mysterious Lawrence Fishburne at its center. Their review then goes on to point out that the film features some bad language before concluding that most kids 14 and up could probably handle it all just fine, as long as they didn't find it too confusing. None of that sounds like what you'd find in an R-rated film, but The Matrix was rated R by the MPAA nonetheless. Maybe it was because it was seen as confusing? Complex writing isn't usually a factor in how the MPAA rates its films, but stranger things have happened. Whoa. Few child stars in the 90s were bigger than Macaulay Culkin. After the mega success of Home Alone, Culkin's father, who was his manager at the time, had gotten wind of a new psychological thriller about a disturbed child, penned by acclaimed writer Ian McEwan. Culkin's father, Kit, pushed for Macaulay to star in The Good Son, because Kit dangled his son pulling out of participating in Home Alone 2 Lost in New York as a threat if he didn't get the part. He got the part. Culkin was cast as the evil lead, and McEwan was tasked with rewriting the script to accommodate its new star, before eventually being let go from the project altogether. What could have been a creepy film comes off as unintentionally campy because of Culkin's presence. Yet the MPAA still gave The Good Son an R rating for acts of violence and terror involving a disturbed child. Nearly all the violence happens off-screen, but given just how big of a star Culkin was at the time, perhaps the MPAA awarded the film its restricted rating simply to keep fellow kids from seeing their Home Alone hero go psycho. Of all the bizarre reasons movies have been given R ratings, this one is probably the weirdest. Snakes on a Plane was rated R not because the MPAA had some strange reason they pulled out of nowhere at the last second, but because the filmmakers actually wanted an R rating. In fact, they wanted that R rating so badly they went back after the film had wrapped and shot some extra scenes to make the movie more violent. But why? According to the LA Times, the whole point of the movie was the ridiculous B-movie premise, and fans of B-movies don't want to see films that have been watered down for the kids. In fact, fans were so vocal about what they wanted in Snakes on a Plane that Samuel L. Jackson even said they were a part of the collaborative process. According to Entertainment Weekly, the new additions included more violent snake strikes, some airplane bathroom hookups which also involve snake attacks, and the fed-up, profanity-laced line delivered by Jackson which made the movie the meme it is today.
I have had it with these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane!
So did this movie, like other films that have been unfairly slapped with an R rating, suffer at the box office for it? Well, it might have, considering it grossed just $62 million, but it's hard to say whether a PG-13 rating would have helped. All you can safely say is that if Snakes on a Plane had been rated PG-13, Samuel L. Jackson would never have uttered that iconic line, or at the very least, it would have sounded a whole lot different.
I have had it with these monkey-fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane!
And is that a world anybody wants to live in?
One of the weirdest storytelling tricks employed by your favorite TV shows is subliminal messaging, the art of sneaking little clues, imagery, or hints on screen that a viewer might not even notice the first, second, or even third time through. Get ready to have your brain snapped around like a rubber band when you see how ingeniously these shows have been messing with your head. You might never trust TV again. Lost. Lost was loaded with more hidden messages than a bag full of fortune cookies, and one of the most interesting came from the fan favorite Mr. Echo, a violent Nigerian warlord turned Catholic priest.
You do not know who I am.
Throughout the series, Mr. Echo wields a wooden stick with the numbers of Bible passages carved into it. The only explanation we're ever given is when Locke says it's just because he's a priest. But if you've ever been to a Catholic church, you may have noticed that a bow staff is not part of the usual vestments. If you're one of those curious viewers who paused the screen on close-ups of Echo's stick, then you know that the specific Bible passages scrawled into the wood explain Echo's entire story. Titus 3 tells of sinners living in malice and envy, but finding salvation in God, thus explaining Echo's background story before the show does. And Acts 4:12 is a subtle clue about Echo's less than authorized priesthood. Most importantly, it also features the famous Psalm 23, referring to Echo's final encounter with the smoke monster. The Simpsons. The Simpsons has been on the air for so long that we barely even notice that the characters look really strange. The yellow skin and blue hair are weird enough, not to mention whatever bizarre cartoon magic is going on with the kids' spiky heads. On top of that, they all have 4 fingers instead of 5. To be fair, most cartoon characters in history have had 4 fingers. It's just easier to animate, and as Walt Disney himself said, 5 fingers would have made Mickey's hands look like a bunch of bananas. There is one Simpsons character whose hands bear that all-powerful 5th finger, though: God. When the Almighty shows up to hang out in Homer the Heretic, the Divine Creator has 5-fingered hands and 5-toed feet, just like we do. It's a clever subliminal message that raises many questions, including whether God in the world of The Simpsons is one of our world's human animators in charge of Springfield. Or maybe that Sunday school song was right and he just needs that extra finger to hold the whole world in his hands. Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is usually known more for bloody violence and killing off your favorite characters than for subtlety, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Just take a look at the costumes, designed by Michelle Clapton, which are full of tiny details that hint at story. Perhaps the most ingenious bit of subliminal messaging that Clapton literally wove into a Game of Thrones outfit is on Sansa Stark's wedding dress, worn when she marries into House Lannister. The dress depicts a direwolf, the sigil of House Stark, being wrapped up and dominated by a lion, the Lannister sigil. Embroiderer Michelle Carragher describes on her website how the colors of the dress, hinting at the families those colors represent, tell Sansa's entire story. The red weavings depict the growing influence of the Lannisters on Sansa's psyche, just as the series itself shows her slowly evolving to be more and more like those manipulative blonde scoundrels. How I Met Your Mother. As a standard 3-camera sitcom, How I Met Your Mother certainly didn't employ esoteric magic of subliminal clues on a regular basis, but it did make clever use of them in the episode Bad News. If you're paying attention, you'll notice that in the first scene, the number 50 is right in the middle of the screen, kicking off a countdown that runs through the entire episode, from the label on a beer to book covers to a weirdly sequential set of lottery numbers. If you're sharp-eyed enough to notice, you'll know that the bad news is inching closer and closer until the countdown reaches 1. After building up that kind of subliminal dread about the unstoppable march of time, the news is revealed and, as expected, it's quite bad. Breaking Bad. When future generations look back, Breaking Bad might end up being regarded as the Shakespearean epic of our time. It's got compelling character progression, fantastic writing, great acting, a dead body crashing through a bathtub, and of course, subliminal messaging. Every item, scene, and moment in Breaking Bad is there for a reason, particularly when it comes to the show's use of color. The color coding has been analyzed in major publications like Slate and Time, revealing that the colors that any character wears on the show will hint at what's going on in their head. When we first meet Walt, he's a mild-mannered cream puff who wears the muted colors of a potato sack. When Walt takes the identity of Heisenberg and starts getting drunk on power, his wardrobe switches to darker, stronger colors, only moving back to a milder khaki during moments of insecurity. Daredevil. In the comics, Daredevil's arch-nemesis, Wilson Fisk, called himself the Kingpin and always wore luxurious white suits. In the first season of Daredevil, though, Fisk never uses the Kingpin name and sticks to basic black. As the show goes on, Fisk's evolution into the Kingpin is symbolized by color coding. The more evil he gets, the lighter his clothing. When his girlfriend Vanessa convinces him to go public, she also steers him toward lighter gray suits. And his final scene of the season, sitting in a prison cell, he's finally wearing a pristine white. His wardrobe change means he's accepted the rage within him, which is bad news for a certain blind lawyer whose clothes take their own change from black to red. Fringe. One of the creepiest feelings that you can experience is the sensation that you're being watched. And if you've ever had the urge to look over your shoulder while you're watching Fringe, there's a reason for that. Hidden within every single episode, yes, every episode over multiple seasons, is an observer, a bald man in a business suit who lingers in the background and watches whatever weird stuff is going on.
Oh, come on.
If that wasn't creepy enough, Fox marketed the Observer's reveal on Fringe by having an Observer Week where observers popped up in all of Fox's programming, appearing in unlikely places like American Idol and even a NASCAR race and an NFL game with no explanation offered. It's a long way to go to creep out your audience, but it's pretty cool.
Game shows either vet potential contestants so only the best of the best make it through, or they purposely find the goofiest weirdos on earth whose ridiculous answers will both make the audience laugh and make them feel better about themselves. And judging by contestants like these, it seems like TV executives are way more interested in the latter. Naked Grandma. It takes a lot to be outrageous on Steve Harvey's Family Feud, in which seemingly every survey is designed to create as many dirty answers as possible. But one contestant, Rod, still found a way to stand out.
Something a burglar would not want to see when he breaks into a house. Rod!
Naked grandma!
Naked, huh?
Amazingly, he turned out to be right. Apparently, the judges decided a naked grandma fits under the category of occupant. Gun was lumped in with that answer too. And to be fair, a gun-toting naked grandma would be the only thing that's worse. Surf Clay. It's hard to guess the answer to a puzzle about a song you've never heard, but you should be able to at least filter out answers in your head that make literally no sense. Or you could be Wheel of Fortune contestant Steven. With very few letters left uncovered, Steven buzzed in to solve the puzzle. The answer was clearly Surf City, Here We Come, lyrics to a song by Jan and Dean from 1963. But presumably, Steven had never heard of this song before, because he said this instead.
Steven, Surf Clay, Where We Go. No.
Now, besides the fact that Surf Clay, Where We Go makes no sense, you've probably noticed several other issues with his answer. He guesses where for a word with 4 letters. Also, come is spelled out completely, and yet he still guesses go. Sorry, Steven. We searched everywhere, and this is the closest we could find to Surf Clay. Please use it in good health. Pill pushers. In this Wheel of Fortune puzzle, contestant Joe scored a cool $1,600 by asking for a P. While the solution to this one isn't quite a slam dunk, there's enough here to hazard a guess, right? What there isn't, however, is more than one P. That doesn't stop Joe, though.
A group of pill pushers?
It's not the worst guess for the puzzle. Let's just remember, Joe just asked for a P, and, well, if there's one thing you need for pill pushers, it's P's. The thing that makes it really bizarre, though, is that it's pretty unlikely that a family show like Wheel of Fortune would feature a puzzle about pill pushers. Pat Sajak offered a helpful reminder that a kid-friendly game of Hangman is not where you go to talk drugs.
This is Wheel of Fortune, Joe!
So what's the right answer?
A group of well-wishers.
Yeah, that's it.
That's what Wheel of Fortune wants to gift the world, you guys. Well wishes, not pills or their pushers. Of course, after this next example from Wheel of Fortune, you might need to take something to help you forget. Regis and Kelly who? On shows like Wheel of Fortune, pronunciation is key. Contestants have lost thousands of dollars for mistakes as simple as dropping the G from swimming.
7 swans a-swimming.
Yeah, that's not, yeah.
So, if you're ever on the show, remember to enunciate your answers perfectly. Unfortunately, literally everyone on one particular episode did not. The answer to the puzzle was very clearly Regis Philbin and Kelly Ripa, and contestant Shane knew it. He did not, however, know how to pronounce Regis's last name.
Regis Philbin and Kelly Ripa.
No, I'm sorry.
He was close, but as the old saying goes,
close only counts in horse grenades.
What?
It's a saying, because if you're playing horseshoes and then you throw a grenade at a horse, it doesn't have to be that close and you can still blow the horse's legs off.
So the next contestant spins, adds another letter, and then goes bankrupt. You got greedy, Lee. When it comes back around to George, who only has $900, he does what any sensible person would do when the correct answer is staring you in the face. Spend what little money you have buying vowels to fill in the puzzle you already should know the answer to. Now George only has $400 left. Time to solve. And he does, except...
Regis Philbin and Kelly Ripa.
Wrong again. Back to Shane, who this time doesn't even bother to spin. He's already got almost $4,000. He's got this puzzle in the bag, right?
Regis Philbin and Kelly Ripa.
No.
Back to Lee. He spins to fill every remaining consonant, leaving the puzzle 100% exposed. So with all the letters on the board, there's no way Lee can screw this one up, right?
Lee, would you like to say what's up there?
Regis Philbin and Kelly Ripa.
No.
Finally, just before the show bled into Jeopardy's runtime, George mercifully solved the puzzle and pronounced everything correctly.
George, you want to try this?
I'll try and solve it, Pat. Yeah. Regis Philbin and Kelly Ripa.
There you go.
That's the saddest way anyone's ever won $400. Municipal projects of the apes. When most people drive around, they don't really think about who builds the roads they're on, even when those roads happen to date back over 1,000 years. So you can't really fault weakest link contestant Christy for not knowing the answer to this question.
Christy, in UK geography, the road called Watling Street that now forms part of the A5 was originally built by which civilization?
Could be anyone, right? Maybe the Vikings built it, or maybe it was the Gauls, or perhaps it could have even been the Romans, which is the right answer, or maybe it was...
Apes.
Yes, maybe it was the apes. Black zombies. Over the last several years, zombies have come into their own in the world of entertainment. We've got several TV shows and endless movies all about zombies, so it stands to reason that most folks might know how to describe them if asked to do so point blank. Well, most folks besides Christy, who might have some, issues to work out.
Name something you know about zombies. Christy.
Black.
They're black. Okay.
That's not a great answer in general, but it's much worse when the person asking you is Steve Harvey, who, to Christy, maybe looks a little like a zombie. How does Christy justify her answer?
I don't know if they're white or just probably.
Sure, that's technically true. Just like some cars can be red and others can be yellow, some zombies are white and some zombies are black. Christy doesn't see zombie race. Anyone can be a zombie in Christy's America.
It's up there! It's up there!
You shut up, lady.
Between hospital visits, lifelong breathing problems, and a diet of cigarettes, it's amazing anyone survived the Wizard of Oz set. Keep watching for the most dangerous things that happened during the film's production. Workplace health and safety standards were pretty much non-existent in the early 20th century, especially in Hollywood. And there are a few films where this was more apparent than during the filming of The Wizard of Oz. The movie's director, Victor Fleming, was known for being a stickler as well as being a bit of a bully, and he didn't seem to be concerned about letting a minor thing like safety stop him from making the movie he envisioned. From the very beginning of filming, The Wizard of Oz was a site for all kinds of dangerous accidents and unsafe working conditions.
Help! Help! It's no use screaming at a time like this! Nobody will hear you!
For starters, the white snow that fell on the actors during the famous poppy field scene was actually pure asbestos. Crystal asbestos fibers were commonly used by film studios to simulate falling snow, despite the fact that people had been aware of its health risks since the early 20th century. The Wicked Witch's broom was also made up of asbestos, as well as the scarecrow costume that Ray Bolger wore nearly every single day of filming. That wasn't the only costume that might have led to significant health issues either. The Tin Man's costume also caused quite a few problems. Buddy Ebsen, who was the initial actor cast as the Tin Man, turned out to be dangerously allergic to aluminum dust that was used to give him his metallic shine. Ebsen had to be hospitalized due to that allergic reaction and ultimately bowed out of the film entirely. As a result of his time as the Tin Man, he experienced lifelong health effects and breathing problems, and he never even got the chance to appear in the film. Ebsen was replaced by Jack Haley, and the dust was replaced with an aluminum paste that could be painted on. The paint wasn't without its own problems, though. It gave Haley an eye infection, and filming had to be delayed while he recovered. Luckily, Haley was able to keep the job, and he did not appear to have any long-lasting effects from the Tin Man's makeup. The Oz costume woes didn't stop there, unfortunately. Bert Lahr's Cowardly Lion costume had been fashioned out of a genuine lion hide, which unsurprisingly made it very heavy and hot inside. Coupled with the heat generated by the overhead studio lights, Lahr overheating while in character became a legitimate concern. Even more dramatic incidents occurred during filming. When the Wicked Witch leaves Munchkin Land in a pyrotechnic display of fire and smoke, Margaret Hamilton was supposed to drop through a trapdoor, but it malfunctioned, and Hamilton suffered second and third degree burns on her face and hands. To make matters worse, her role as the Wicked Witch required her to be painted green, and the only way to remove the paint was with alcohol, which exacerbated her wounds. Hamilton had to take 6 weeks off to recover before she returned to the set, on the condition that she would not do any more scenes involving fireworks. Betty Danko, Hamilton's stunt double, was tasked with filming the next scene that required fire, and that scene also went horribly wrong. While filming the moment in which the Wicked Witch writes "Surrender Dorothy" across the sky with a broom, Danko was required to sit on an actual metal pipe that was filled with combustible materials. The pipe exploded and Danko suffered extreme burns on her legs. She had to be hospitalized for 11 days. The studio still decided to go forward with the skywriting scene, hiring another stunt actress to finish the take. And then there's Judy Garland. The now iconic star hadn't been the top choice to play Dorothy. Instead, studio heads wanted Shirley Temple, who was 6 years younger than Garland. Upon auditioning, however, Temple was found to be lacking in vocal range. Garland was 16 years old when she shot the film, and she was required to take extreme measures to make her body appear younger, including having her breasts taped down and squeezing into a tight corset. The studio also put her on a weight control diet. This consisted of only chicken soup, black coffee, and cigarettes, supplemented with diet pills for good measure. Additionally, the studio administered adrenaline shots to keep her energy up, but at night she was given the sleep aid Seconal to help her rest. Sadly, this wasn't a new thing for Garland, as her mother was known to give her what she called pep pills even when she had performed as a young child. Nobody should ever have to die in the process of making movies, and thankfully, fatal accidents on movie sets are pretty rare, but that doesn't mean they don't happen. Here are some of the cast and crew members who have been killed on set. In the immediate aftermath of the death of Helena Hutchins, many pointed to a similar incident that occurred 28 years earlier, the death of Brandon Lee. Lee died on the set of the gothic superhero classic The Crow on March 31, 1993. He was just 28. Like Hutchins, Lee was shot and killed by a prop gun that a fellow actor believed contained blanks. Lee's autopsy revealed that he had been killed by a fragment of a dummy shell that had been previously fired but which had been lodged in the gun's barrel, unknown to the production team. Though a lawsuit filed by Lee's family alleged that crew members improperly manufactured their own from live ammunition, no charges were ever filed. Following the death of Hutchins in 2021, the family of Brandon Lee took to Twitter to share their condolences and to decry the circumstances that could let such a horrific accident happen again. They wrote, "Our hearts go out to the family of Helena Hutchins and to Joel Souza and all involved in the incident on Rust. No one should ever be killed by a gun on a film set, period." The on-set death of Brandon Lee wasn't the first to occur as the result of a firearm. In 1984, 26-year-old actor John Herrick Hexum lost his life as a result of what Entertainment Weekly described as a fatal joke. At the time, Hexum was engaged in filming on the CBS adventure series Cover Up, playing a model and ex-Green Beret named Mac Harper. Production had run into numerous delays, leaving Hexum bored on set. After discovering a .44 Magnum prop gun, the actor jokingly made his exasperation known to the cast and crew by holding the gun to his head and pulling the trigger. Though the weapon only contained blanks, the force of the blast at short range fractured Hexum's skull and caused a fatal brain hemorrhage.
In this demonstration, a .38 blank was fired. As you can see, the explosion can do a lot of damage.
He died after 5 hours of emergency surgery at Beverly Hills Medical Center. Daniel Oates, former police chief of Miami Beach and Aurora, Colorado, told CNN how even prop guns have the potential to be fatal. He said, "They all contain a charge, a powder that creates the noise and the explosive, the visual blast, and usually it's some kind of wire or something that explodes out of the weapon when it's fired. These weapons can be very, very dangerous." For as long as movies have been around, Hollywood has tried to wow cinema audiences with incredible stunts. Like many of his contemporaries, the silent comic Buster Keaton was known for doing his own stunts, which included clearing planks from railway tracks while sitting on the front of a movie train and standing stock still as the wall of a house collapses on top of him. No safety regulations existed at the time, but as the years have passed, Hollywood stunts have become far safer. In 2011, the veteran stunt performer Hal Needham told The Independent, "It is much safer today than when I was doing stunts eons ago. Stuntmen today are more talented, more experienced, and in better shape. The equipment they have today is much better." However, tragic accidents still happen. In 2017, the highly respected stunt motorcycle rider Joy Harris was killed on the set of Deadpool 2.
The bike just sped off and went straight into the building.
The movie's production company, TCF Vancouver Productions Limited, was later held responsible and fined $300,000. They were found to have instructed Harris not to wear safety headgear while operating the motorcycle. 20th Century Fox subsequently arranged a settlement with Harris's family out of court. Harris's colleague, Melissa Stubbs, later said her death was senseless and could have been avoided. In 1982, the set of Twilight Zone the movie was struck by tragedy when veteran actor Vic Morrow was killed in a tragic helicopter accident, along with 2 child actors he was working with, Renee Shin-Yi Chen, 6, and Mika Din Lei, 7. Morrow had made his name during the 1960s as the star of the World War II TV series Combat. Just before he was killed, Morrow was carrying the 2 children on a set depicting a battle during the Vietnam War. Suddenly, a chartered helicopter became affected by the pyrotechnics. The pilot lost control of the helicopter, striking the 3 actors with the spinning rotor blades and killing them instantly. John Landis, who was co-directing the film, was charged with involuntary manslaughter, along with 4 other crew members, including the helicopter pilot and the special effects coordinator. All 5 defendants would be acquitted following a highly publicized trial, which helped cast light to the dangers of Hollywood film sets at the time. Following the tragic deaths that occurred on the set of Twilight Zone, health and safety regulations in Hollywood were subject to such an overhaul that insurance companies were willing to insure film sets for the first time. The 1986 classic Top Gun is one of the most beloved action movies of all time, but the film's production was overshadowed by the death of the acclaimed stunt pilot Art Scholl. Scholl had enjoyed a distinguished career as a Hollywood stunt pilot with the movies Blue Thunder and The Right Stuff among his many credits. He was considered among the best in the field of aeronautics, having been brought into the movie stunt work by Paul Mantz and Frank Tallman, two legendary Hollywood stunt pilots who also lost their lives in accidents while filming. Scholl was in San Diego County piloting an aerobatic biplane equipped with cameras to capture his audacious stunts. Suddenly, he lost control of the vehicle at an altitude of 4,000 feet, radioing the stunt team that he was experiencing a problem. His plane plunged into the sea, with debris from the wreckage washing up hours later. Scholl's body was never recovered. A Hollywood star dozes through his scenes, a Dark Knight commits Grand Theft Auto, and Danny DeVito fights a monkey? Batman movies can get a little weird sometimes, so maybe it's no surprise that strange things happen behind the scenes too. Keep watching to learn exactly what. It must be tough being both Bruce Wayne and Batman. You've got to be a socialite playboy during the day, and then you're hitting the streets at night to kick in some skulls and defend Gotham's honor. When does he ever find the time to get some shut-eye?
Bats are nocturnal. Bats may be, but even for billionaire playboys, 3 o'clock is pushing it.
As it turns out, being Batman is grueling for the actors who play him, too. Just ask Christian Bale. During a conversation with GQ, Bale revealed that he has a habit of nodding off on set. In fact, he had an embarrassing moment on the set of Batman Begins, when his co-stars Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman saw him snoozing away. He told the outlet, "In the scene, I was meant to be waking up, so I laid down and just fell asleep, and I didn't hear action. So Michael and Morgan were talking, and I was supposed to join in. I woke up with Michael Caine poking me in the ribs and going, 'Look at that, he's bloody fallen asleep, hasn't he?'" Considering how action-packed Batman movies are, it shouldn't come as any surprise that the occasional accident takes place on set. Most people would expect a stray punch, a pebble in the shoe, or even a broken window or two. But how about damages of up to $500,000? Well, that's how much IMAX cameras are insured for, and Christopher Nolan and his team have totaled more than a few over the years. Warner Brothers execs must have been pulling their hair out when news broke that a Catwoman stunt double had crashed into an IMAX camera on the set of The Dark Knight Rises. While there was an initial denial that the camera was damaged in the accident, the footage from the incident suggested otherwise. Thankfully, the stunt double and cameraman weren't hurt, but that's more than can be said for the insurance company. Early on in Batman Begins, Ra's al Ghul spars with Bruce Wayne on the surface of a frozen glacier. After numerous defeats, Bruce eventually defeats Ra's, only to fall into the freezing water. It's a lesson that teaches Bruce not to become too overconfident in a fight. While the actor wasn't actually required to submerge himself in sub-zero temperatures, the scene didn't come entirely without risk. In fact, this was one of the first scenes shot during production, and it easily could have ended up being the last. The ice fight was filmed in Iceland, and while the weather wasn't exactly bursting with sunshine, the glacier itself caused far more trouble for the cast and crew. As Christian Bale later told the Chicago Tribune, "We were out there and it was splitting, there were big cracks appearing down it, and we all had to stand still and not break it. Still, it's not like Batman can't handle a little ice." The casting of Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze in Batman and Robin was a peculiar choice to say the least. At the same time, Schwarzenegger's icy puns and cold play on words didn't come cheap, as he cost the production a chilling $25 million.
Very nice.
As the biggest star on set, Schwarzenegger attracted a lot of attention for the movie, and even had a few high-profile friends stop by the production every so often. Actor Stogie Kenyatta, who played one of Freeze's thugs in the movie, later told The Hollywood Reporter, "John Bon Jovi came by and he brought Cuban cigars for Arnold, so Arnold had them color it white so he could smoke it in the scenes."
I smoke my stogie anywhere I want. I don't have to find a hideout place like you.
The cigars ended up being the only contribution Bon Jovi made to the movie. The pleasure of writing a tie-in song went to the Smashing Pumpkins, who delivered the Grammy Award-winning track "The End is the Beginning is the End." On the surface, Chris O'Donnell's Robin should have had an easier time in his costume than the other half of the dynamic duo. He didn't require the complex batsuit, it's a notorious issue for Batman actors, and only needed a domino mask to conceal his identity. Of course, it wasn't as simple or as comfortable as that, according to O'Donnell. He once told Entertainment Tonight, "First thing in the morning, they painted my eyes black and then would glue the mask onto my face. It was so hot you would touch the mask and water would just run down your face." O'Donnell added that the Batman Forever suits were also difficult to take off and put on, so he and Val Kilmer stayed in costume for most of the time. Fortunately, costume adjustments were made for the sequel, Batman and Robin. It's a lot of pressure playing Batman. Among other problems, you've got to be able to act your heart out while wearing a cowl that covers most of your face, making it incredibly difficult to see any emotion in your performance. Robert Pattinson found this out the hard way when the Batman director Matt Reeves insisted he redo one specific scene over and over again. From Pattinson's perspective, however, he couldn't see what he was doing wrong, until Reeves eventually called him over to see the issue with the shot. In fact, Reeves later told Insider he believed Pattinson was, at one point, about to burst a vein. Pattinson himself told the outlet, "That was maybe the worst day of the whole shoot because I really genuinely thought it was Reeves that was wrong. I was like, how can we be doing 40 takes of this?" While that might sound excessive, one British tabloid reported that Pattinson had to redo a single scene 50 times. Whether it was the same scene or not is unclear, but it's clearly more than enough to drive anyone a little batty. When Tim Burton's Batman raked in over $411 million at the box office, Warner Brothers began to get a little more protective over its investment. No longer was this a comic book movie made purely for children. It was now a global franchise with huge earning potential. As a result, the studio took some extreme measures when it came to protecting the integrity and secrecy of the sequel, Batman Returns. The cast and crew were given ID badges for a fake movie title called Dictal. These badges were absolutely necessary for them to get around on set, as the studio tried to prevent prying eyes from visiting the production unannounced. That wasn't all, though. The movie's art directors had to shut out the sun and pull down the blinds in their office. This may seem drastic, but it's a drop in the water compared to the security measures taken by Hollywood studios these days. And in a sense, Batman Returns helped lead the way when it comes to the secret nature of franchise movies. Working with animals can often be a challenge, especially since they don't always stick to the script. Batman Returns is a movie filled with animals, including a small army of dastardly penguins. But it was a certain little spider monkey that really caused trouble on set. During an appearance on The Graham Norton Show, Danny DeVito described his horrifying experience with his furry co-star.
Well, you had to work with a monkey.
Yeah, that was horrifying. That was a horrifying experience.
Apparently, the monkey was meant to come and deliver a note from Batman to his character, the Penguin. The crew tested the scene with the animal trainers beforehand, and everything went according to plan. However, when DeVito called the monkey over, things went south, so to speak.
The monkey comes down, takes one look at me, and leaps at my balls.
DeVito added that his costume was thankfully heavily padded, so he was fortunate enough not to feel the full force of the monkey's bite. DeVito wasn't left too shaken by the incident, though, as he did another take, which ultimately proved to be more successful than the first. Superman and Lex Luthor, Batman and Joker, and Joel Schumacher and Val Kilmer? Despite working together on Batman Forever, there was no love lost between director and actor by the time the film hit theaters. In fact, Schumacher once told Vulture, "I didn't say Val Kilmer was difficult to work with on Batman Forever. I said he was psychotic." Schumacher explained to Entertainment Weekly that he'd heard stories about Kilmer's behavior in the past, but he decided to hire him to play Batman anyway, as he thought he was an excellent performer who was perfect for the role. However, their relationship became patchy after just a few weeks of production, and Kilmer's actions towards the rest of the crew rubbed him the wrong way. Schumacher told the outlet that they even had a physical pushing match, and he called the actor badly behaved, rude, and inappropriate. After their encounter on set, Kilmer didn't speak to the director for 2 weeks, a period that Schumacher described as bliss. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Kilmer didn't return for Batman and Robin. Just imagine being cast as Batman and trying on the cape and cowl for the first time. As Robert Pattinson once told Variety, it's a transformative experience. And once the Batsuit is on, what's next on the list? Getting behind the wheel of the Batmobile, of course. Much like anyone else would be, Pattinson was pretty excited to take the Batmobile for a spin around the block. However, his eagerness ended up causing a few problems. As he told Empire magazine, "They wanted me to drive it like only 10 feet, but I immediately went off for 25 minutes, trying to do all the stunts I'd learned in the normal cars. After that, I was never allowed to drive it without someone else in the car." Let's be honest though, can anyone say they wouldn't do the same? After the sleek and shiny appeal of the previous Batmobiles, the Tumbler was a major departure for the Batman movies. Big, bulky, and looking kinda like a tank that swallowed a smaller tank, it took a while to get used to. However, it has since gone on to become one of the most iconic silver screen Batmobiles.
I gotta get me one of those.
The Tumbler's toughness was put to the test on the streets of Chicago during shooting on Batman Begins. As Christian Bale explained at WonderCon 2005, the vehicle took everyone's breath away, but it also frightened one driver in particular. Bale remembered, "There was even this guy who crashed into it. This poor drunken guy who didn't have a license, who said he got so panicked when he saw the car he thought aliens were landing. Maybe he'd have had an easier ride if it had been the Batman Forever Batmobile." A lot has been said about how difficult it is to wear a bat suit, but how about a villain suit? While Cillian Murphy wore a potato sack over his head to play Scarecrow, and Paul Dano ended up in a Zodiac-style number, these examples pale in comparison to what Arnold Schwarzenegger went through to become Mr. Freeze. At first, the star was willing to shave off all his hair for the role. However, he soon had a change of heart and requested a bald cap instead. That wasn't the biggest challenge for Freeze's look, though. The LED lights used around his mouth caused some concern for both him and the crew, as revealed by Batman and Robin makeup artist Jeff Dawn. Not only were these lights an obstruction for Schwarzenegger while delivering his lines, but it also brought with it another major hazard. Dawn told The Hollywood Reporter, "When you put it in Arnold's mouth, Arnold's saliva would creep into the seams of this thing and attack the batteries. The batteries would immediately start disintegrating and start putting out battery acid into Arnold's mouth. Licking battery acid is never a good idea, of course, even for an icy supervillain." Luckily, the makeup team quickly figured out a solution to this problem, packing the entire device into a small balloon. Now that's cool.